Think I'm ready now.
Hello, you are watching my YouTube channel. I'm your host, kamranarshad. Today, I've invited a guest to my vlog, and I'm going to discuss about her life, her visions, her goal, and most importantly, her field. And today, I'm going to introduce her, who is with me. Welcome to this exclusive interview with Dr. Amira Halperin, an esteemed faculty member in media communication with a wealth of knowledge and experience. Dr. Amira Halperin is at the forefront of shaping the next generation of media professionals. Today, we delve into their insight and perspective on the dynamic landscape of media communication. Hey, Amira, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Our first question is that tell us about yourself. Who is Dr. Amira Halperin?
Thank you very much for asking. So the interesting fact about me is the fact that I'm not only academic, but also a former journalist, which is something very important that helps actually to establish my academic career and work with students. Before I started working as a professor, I worked for a few years as an investigative journalist, and it was work that I did in the Muslim communities in the United Kingdom. And later I started my PhD about the Palestinian community in the United Kingdom. And as you said, I'm a professor of media and communications. So I worked with the Palestinian community about their media and technology usage. And I published a book about this research, my PhD research. And the interesting fact about the book is that as an outsider researcher who is not part of the Palestinian community, the opposite is I'm from the opposite side to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so it raises concerns among many people from different communities from both sides about the reasons behind my interest in this topic and so on and so forth. But when I decided to write the PhD and to write my book, I have received an acknowledgement from people worldwide, including from senior Muslim professors, that this research actually promotes reconciliation and dehumanization. And so this is the line that I'm working with also in my teaching and research.
Okay, that's great. That's glad to know about what you have done. Okay. What is your earliest childhood memory that you believe defines you, who you are today?
So yeah, sorry, I started with my work and career and not with my childhood, but your question is excellent because this is very much related also to my work. Because I was born a year after a major war in Israel, my home country. And this war was in 1973. And many babies were born following this war. And all of us, as adults today, we are being defined as the babies of this war because many parents wanted to have babies following the war. And so I was born in this atmosphere of post-war, post-trauma, and I grew up with this grief and with this sadness, and knowing that my father lost his brother was something that influenced my personal life and my professional life as well. My mother's side, the family are Holocaust survivors, so it even more intensified the feeling of being born into a reality which is very sad reality, a reality of people that lived outside of the ashes, really. And I think that when I started my journey into the Palestinian community, it was the first time that I was able to sit in front of the other side and the people that were the enemy in this war, Hamas and Fatah people, to interview them, one-on-one interviews, learn about their ideas and what they think about without prejudice, and this is not difficult thing to do.
Okay, tragedy is a part of a life, right? So how did you face that tragedies and sadness in your life?
Sorry, can you repeat, Kam?
I said tragedy is a part of the life. So how did you face that phase in your life? Tragedy, sadness, and all that, difficulties.
Yeah. When I was younger, before I started the university, my aim was always, I strived always to write this story, my personal story and my nation's story. It was my dream I remember as a young girl to write about it, to talk about it. And it felt like sometimes, if you ask about personal feelings,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
felt sometimes like there is no hope, because this war between the Palestinians, between the Arab world and Israel, is ongoing for so many years. So it feels sometimes that there is no hope for this, but for this reason. But I think that the only way for me to fight against these feelings is actually through my work. And the problem I encountered today, in the climate today, is a problem that actually even more difficult than it used to be in the past. Because whereas in the past I was able to conduct a PhD research and to talk about my research, today I live in the UK, and until recently I worked at one of the major academic institutions, major universities in the UK, and I find that the climate, the atmosphere is very problematic for Israeli scholars to express their views as scholars, not as Israelis, not as Jewish, but as scholars. And if I may, I would be able to explain what I mean about talking about this topic.
Okay. Have you ever been to go anywhere for journalism, any other country?
Any other countries? Yeah.
Okay.
I lived so far in 4 countries.
Okay.
So I lived in Canada,
Okay.
in China, in England,
Mm.
and in my home country. I'm also a British citizen,
Yeah.
so it is also a place where I can stay as a second place of residence.
And how was your experience in those countries about journalism, if I ask?
Yeah, I think that Canada was very, very interesting. And I felt that I did something very meaningful working in Canada. I worked in Canada in one of the Ivy League universities there, UBC.
Yeah.
And I worked on research of Syrian refugees and media. And I think that my aim was to have an impact beyond academia. So what I did is I worked with the Canadian government, with Canadian NGOs, in order to promote free speech of refugees, in order to promote the discourse of refugees and about refugees, because there was a major problem of coverage of refugees' stories, a problem that led to horrific consequences like suicide of young children that have been bullied by the media. And so I think that this was my aim, and I initiated many events, and that it was related to both journalism and media, because, for example, in one of the events, I invited the White Helmets, the Syrian White Helmets, that were working as a journalist in Syria, in addition to their rescue operations work, because journalists couldn't access. So they just use their mobile phones to document the atrocities that are happening there during the Assad regime's and the war. And this was very interesting to see
Okay,
how they work.
but Amira, Muslims communities in Canada have been facing very difficulties nowadays. What do you think on it? What is your opinion
Um,
on it, actually?
sorry, can you repeat?
I said Muslims in Canada, Muslim community who live in Canada, they have been facing difficulties nowadays. What do you think?
Yeah, I probably would like to know more about the Muslims in general in other places that I've been, not only in Canada, because now I live in the UK, and now we have this war between Hamas and Israel, which probably this is the major problem that we see here in the UK in terms of the reaction to the Muslim community
Then
following
why
the
is it? Why is it?
But I think that it's interesting question, and there is not a simple answer and not very direct and not non-complex answer to this. But I think that from what I understand and from what I see and from my experience working with students, with governments, and with my professors, colleagues, professors, and so on, I can tell you one thing that is a major thing. First of all, the war that is happening now in Israel, actually, between the terrorist organization Hamas and Israel, the war that occurs there, it seems to be that it's a remote for many communities, right? In Canada, in the UK, it seems to be like it doesn't relate to these communities. The problem is that because this is exactly what I'm working on as a media scholar, because we have these new technologies and the opportunity for people to learn about conflicts outside of their region, we have this interest in what is happening. So this is a fact. We can't do anything about it.
Okay.
The problem we have is that Muslim communities and Jewish communities are in a dispute. There are clashes in the UK on a daily basis because of the war. But if you would ask me about the problem that I can highlight, which relates to my profession, I would like to highlight one major problem that I would like to highlight, of course, beyond, of course, the demonstrations and the rallies against Israel and so on. And of course, Muslims are also, as you said, been targeted. The major problem that we talk about here as academics is the problem of freedom of speech.
All right.
And
actually, this is the problem in anywhere.
Yeah, and in Canada as well, because there is a problem of lack of understanding what does it mean freedom of speech, and what are the limitations of freedom of speech.
Amira, as a journalist, being a journalist, what you have done for the Muslim community so far? Did you highlight that issues to the public or the politicians as well? Being a journalist.
Well, I worked in journalism. The major work that I did was about radicalization in the United Kingdom. So I interviewed people that have been radicalized. I interviewed families of terrorists shortly after terrorist attacks have been carried by their family members.
Really?
I did interviews. Yes, because I started my work for the BBC shortly after I graduated as an MA student. At the time, I worked on a documentary about a terrorist attack that occurred in Israel. So I interviewed for BBC and for my documentary terrorists. And so this phenomenon of terrorism, radicalization is not new for me. So I am really now following the news from Israel, and I'm not surprised because I worked also on Hamas funding in the UK. So everything is very clear to me.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, what motivated you to pursue a career as an assistant professor in media and communication? And how do you contribute to the academic and research initiative within the department?
I always say that when I've been asked, I always say that I don't see my role as a professor merely as a teacher.
Okay.
Because we are teachers. In the end, we are teachers, right? We teach the next generation, like you highlighted. But it's not merely this. I think that our role is not only to be a lecturer in and to lecture to our students, but also to help them pave the way and work with them in order for them to understand what is the impact of our research on the government, on communities, and how we can take this research out of the university hall and help governments and help NGOs and actually contribute to this everyday work that we don't see, but that is my role, to teach the students about these things that they don't see.
Fair enough. Amira, what tools do you use for research? What tools?
My research method is, until now, was always field work.
Field work, okay.
Field work, which is individual interviews based on first sources of information. I always go out to the field, and takes me back to what I said in the beginning of our interview, that my journalism background is really helpful in this regard, because I'm able to do this interviews, a journey for my research, for my academic research, bearing in mind that, of course, the result and the way that we do it is very different, but comparing journalism to academia. But the way that we need to do it really, in terms of going out there to the field, find your interviewees, find who is the community, there are similarities here.
Okay, you're a female, you know. When you go to field work, so being a female, do you face any difficulties like harassment or travel issues and all that, you know?
When I started my PhD research, I interviewed very religious Palestinian men.
Okay.
And they were sometimes reluctant to see me without being accompanied by a man. So, and sometimes I had to wear my headscarf. And I also learned for many years Arabic, which helped me in communicating. But in terms of culture, sometimes there are barriers, and sometimes as a woman and not Palestinian religious woman, yes, there are barriers.
So it means you are a flexible person, am I right?
Sorry?
You are a flexible person, am I right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Actually, a journalist should be flexible in every field of life. A person should be flexible in every field of life, I must say. Okay. Amira, can you share insights into the courses you teach and the research areas you focus on within media and communication? How do you keep your curriculum and research relevant in the fast evolving media landscape?
So refugees is a big topic, especially if we look here following the Brexit, and the reason for the Brexit in the UK, for example, was the question and the dilemma between people who were really supportive of the government's decision in regards to refugees, a quota and so on. So this, for example, you see that the largest waves of refugees for the Middle East is a big phenomenon here. It's very important in the UK, in Canada, and elsewhere. So when I started working on this research, I really found out that there are similarities between the academic research to what is really happening on the ground. And this is how I keep this research relevant, because I follow up current affairs and I see what are the needs and so on and so forth. And I didn't talk much about China, but when I worked in China, it was also an interesting experience, because in China you need, again, to learn a different culture and to learn how to make your research relevant in this landscape.
And how do you ever follow Pakistani politics?
Sorry?
Do you follow Pakistani politics?
I follow politics worldwide, but I also have friends from Pakistan, and that I worked with and collaborated with here in the UK and elsewhere. And this is also a good question for you to ask, because in my opinion, there are two things that are important for me in this interview that we are doing now. First is that I'm teaching students from all over the world. Exactly. So I have many students from Pakistan.
Okay, 8th February is the election day in Pakistan, and Nawaz Sharif again is going to be Prime Minister of Pakistan again. because ex-Prime
Yeah, and
Minister Imran Khan, he's in a jail. He's in prison.
And we discussed this in class. I mean, when I teach, we always discuss global politics. It's always the case. And another thing is important for me regarding to this is the fact that you are based in Pakistan and you are working for Pakistani TV. So I think that this is also exactly stress on the fact that it's important to have this collaboration between us and not isolation. But
you can judge the things from my expressions of face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we all face the same problems in the end. We all human beings and we all face the problems. And like you're talking about your governments and your politics in countries like Pakistan, I hear from many students of mine from Jordan and Pakistan and other countries and other parts of the world, when they hear where I'm coming from, they said, if we compare it, you know what we are talking about, because you're coming from a problematic region in the sense of politics and of course culture and so on.
Okay, Amira, as an assistant professor, how do you engage students and foster critical thinking in the field of media and communication? Because I have heard about critical thinking a lot. So what is critical thinking and how we can use for decision making?
First of all, I give them examples from my own research and from daily experiences of others. So if I talk, for example, about my research, I teach them that, for example, if we look at the Palestinian media, so when I interviewed Palestinians, they don't look at one source in order to receive information, but rather they look at different national and international sources. And this is the way how you develop your critical thinking. You don't rely on the media, you don't rely on one source as the source, but rather you compare between them. And this is one. And the other thing is, of course, to always ask questions and to think critically. This is the major thing we teach, and this is the very good question, that because this is the major thing that we teach students, is to be critical, not to accept things as is. And they can critique professors, they can critique politicians, they can critique even the professors, their own professors.
But now they rely on social media. They get the news from there. Now the students of communication or media students, they rely on social media news. They get news from the social media. Everyone is using social media by his own, and he puts some status, and they actually rely on that. This is the news. They already they get the thing and post on their wall as well.
This is a major problem.
So this is not the journalism, but they call that they are journalists.
One of the problems that the UK government now is highlighting is the problem of young Britons who have been incited by Hamas websites, for example, because there is a war now going on, and there is a problem of radicalization online. So we all know about misinformation, fake news, but this is exactly the case where we can develop this discussion further. And we say to students, it's not only, you have to learn as the journalist, the future journalist, and as journalist students, you have to learn it's not only misinformation and fake news, but also incitement online, and we don't have regulation. We don't always have regulation, so people can disseminate whatever they choose to.
All right. As we conclude our interview with Dr. Amira Halperin, we extend our gratitude for sharing valuable insights into the ever-evolving realm of media communication. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amira Halperin, for the time.
Thank you, Kamran. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Bye.